This is a DeMarie Productions podcast.
I want to talk about it in the vein of entrepreneur-ing and entrepreneurship. It, has relationships and partnership taken a back seat in your life?
Who are you, my father? Yeah. We're gonna get into the personal of all this. Yes and no.
Great. Partnerships, Bill Mark. Take one.
So for the right partner, you would drop everything and just...
there's very much a world here where if the right guy comes along, you will never hear from me again. That I am on some farm outside of Amsterdam,
Saskatchewan,
growing my tulips, never to be heard from again.
Really? Truthfully, how much change are you capable of at this point in your life?
Yeah. I think that's something that you tell yourself as when it's not working out for you in the city, you have this make-believe fantasy that is even a fucking remote possibility, of which it's not.
The grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be what I'm not doing. What do you want to talk about?
So this morning I was walking to get the car and I passed by this person whose scent immediately took me back to 4th grade. And it wasn't just any day in 4th grade. It was a fall day in 4th grade that I so vividly could remember from walking past somebody, all because of their scent. Scent will do this to me occasionally. It will absolutely smack me over the head. Yeah. And usually it's to a good place. I've never had it happen to a bad place, but I'm just curious if that happens to you too ever.
Yeah, mine's not as sunny a story, I suppose. But yes, the power of sense memory, there's times when I will smell, especially in the spring, kind of around now. I was at BBG last weekend, Brooklyn Botanic Garden.
Oh, yeah.
There's culture in the boroughs, Frank, not in Manhattan.
Yes, I'm aware. I've read about it in books.
When I was 17, I was in the hospital for a bit and I got in a car accident. When I got out of the hospital, I had sight again. I had all of my face was broken. So I had none of those things for a while. When I went in the hospital, it was winter and snowing. When I came out of the hospital, it was spring.
Jesus.
And flowery. And so I have these really strong memories of those first days of being super sensorial. That the smell will take me to that time. And then I remember how sharp my hearing was. I just lost one eye, right? That was
so kind of experiencing that right now that we're in spring?
Like I said, so when we were at BBG the other day, yes, I was walking around the Japanese gardens and I was I could immediately get there. And I'm 49. That was when I was 17. It's 32 fucking years ago. It quickly zaps me back.
When that happens to you, I don't know. I just literally snapped because you snapped. That doesn't take you to a place of a gratitude memory.
Oh, no. Yeah. I thought you were going to say trauma. It takes me to that's a good place. It feels warm. It feels cozy. It feels fuzzy. It's not at all traumatic. It was like a reawakening.
Yeah.
It's like an uncelebrated birthday.
When a fragrance does trigger my memory, it's never to a certain person or thing. It's to a feeling is usually which is placed in a time and a environment that I viscerally can remember, but it's always about the feeling of how I was feeling in that memory.
Yeah, I mean, my kids sleep at night they'll ask Abby for one of her shirts from the week, like a t-shirt or an undershirt that she's worn, and they sleep with it up near their nose. And when the smell gets too diluted, they will ask her for a fresh one.
Really?
And a fresh one means one that smells more like mom, and they both do it.
That's
independent
cute.
of each other. Yeah, so all to underscore that sense memory has very strong powers.
But it is spring, and allergies are fucking with me so hard already.
Amelia too. We were talking about this earlier.
Brutal. But today, the topic is partnerships.
Yes.
So partnerships to me, I'm curious what it means to you. For me, it's got multiple different things. Partnerships in business, partnerships in life. Our partnership, our beautiful
That's the first one.
Partnership.
The first one that comes to mind is our partnership.
And what do you call a completely zero sex-based friendship? What do you call that?
I think you call that marriage.
Platonic.
No.
Our strictly platonic friendship, our partnership, is actually one that I hold very dear to my heart, Billy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the question in there? What's partnership to me?
What interests you about partnerships?
What interests me about it and its value, I think, is in support and collaboration, right? Partners, we'll get to partnerships and brands and things like that. But before we get to a more cynical space, just talking about the partners that we have in our lives and the partnerships that we create in our lives to mutually benefit something. Me and my wife, me and you, me and even employers at times, right? Where I'm selling a piece of myself for something that they get in return. So I think it's a fair trade based on good alignment.
I've had good ones. I've had some bad ones. I've had them in business, but I've also, we've had some positive partnerships that we both worked on when it comes to pairing brands with celebrities or well-known influencers. We've also had a few that have gone awry.
We had a troublesome one.
We've had a few.
Yeah. A few, have we?
A few.
At least one.
And so I think that they're an interesting part of business. I think that there's something that you got to be careful when you enter into a partnership. I think it's like there's a lot of effort and strategy and pre-planning that should go into it, not necessarily something you should take lightly. However, when done well, I think that some of the biggest successes, like, there's no I in team and all that stuff, like partnership and building a community around an idea or a campaign or an execution of something like a business can be very, very satisfying and very fulfilling.
It can be, there is a slippery slope there where you're buying street cred or you're buying brand cred by trying to partner. If it's
a shallow partnership,
yeah,
sure.
Right. And one that is too misaligned or uneven,
Yeah.
I think brands really shoot for the moon sometimes and end up there. Or they undercut themselves and they think a host of many partnerships will equal some sort of like relevance to an audience or desired audience. So
yeah.
I agree. I think coming back full circle, it's about the alignment of the partnership and what is mutually beneficial to each engaged party.
From an entrepreneurial point of view, none of the companies that have been my best and most successful did I do by myself. There was always a partnership in some degree. This is where I've learned a lot over the years of what works and what doesn't work. There's kind of a fine line where you're talking about like the mutually beneficial aspect of a partnership. Yeah, you need to understand what you're bringing to the table before entering a partnership. Also, what you expect from the other person. Like, it does need to be quite clear. This is why I love a contract. One of the many reasons why is because that document can help you lay out the rights and responsibilities of a partnership and hold people accountable to it at the end of the day. And that's true for if you're starting a business with a partnership or a friend, or if you're bringing on an influencer to be the face of your brand. Like, pre-negotiated terms, being clear and understood and both agreed upon is what's going to make for a smooth and successful partnership.
It's funny that there are only a couple life lessons that have gone in this direction, but there are things that I learned in my profession that I've pushed back into my relationship, into my marriage. And one of them is definitely this. It's about the alignment of partnership, and it's about the detail and the open and the honesty. Like Abby and I will still have State of the Union dates like once every month or so, right?
I love
every
that.
6 weeks, where we go out and we just talk about all the little shit. We get that out of the way, like who needs to go to where and camp and this and your mother's visiting and all that.
Logistics.
Down to like, okay, now 5 years from now, where do we see ourselves? You find some shit out in those moments, especially when you fold in a few
Is it also a
cocktails.
time to like air any grievances of like, and that
Yeah.
you did that?
It's actually more of an opportunity to not get to that, so that your grievances are only like the past 5 days or 10 days, right? So you're not letting shit store up, or you're like, well, last summer you fucking pissed me off when you.
Yeah.
But getting back to the original point is, it's like that's how brands, I think, do it really well. When brands do it really well, that's a result of clearly communicating what's in it for us, what's in it for you. We're both trying to get to this thing, a shared audience or a crossover audience or whatever, the sum greater than its parts, right? When that is very clear, partnerships are fruitful. And we'll find out from Celine in a minute, like, how to identify those. But when it's not, they are fucking disastrous.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of those.
No, it sounds like you've learned, like you're saying, good communication is also very important for a successful.
And just being honest, like, we're
Relationship or
doing this. Look,
partnership.
we love your brand, but we're also doing this for bottom line reasons. We're doing this for really tactile
Motives, to understand each other's motives.
That's right.
The term partnership as it relates to business versus partnership with personal, one thing that I have learned is that they are two very different types of partnerships. And I used to date my boyfriends as business partners. And I used to bring very business kind of logic to a personal relationship. And that's simply not like.
That's super romantic. Go on.
No, it wasn't romantic. Well, it was
kidding.
because it's my love language, like, is to filter things through business, honestly.
My love language is to start a business
bringing
with
my the best, what I thought was the smartest part of myself into the relationship to help it be successful. So how's
that different from any other flex, though? And I mean this as a compliment and more forgiving to you of yourself. How's that different than early days dating somebody and just trying to be maybe the best version of yourself, maybe plus 10%, before you settle into like comfort?
Yes, you should always do that. But I'm talking about like when you get into a healthy enough relationship and a long-term relationship where you really are trying to plan for the future, plan for it to be the most successful that it can be.
Yeah.
It takes more effort and strategy. And for me, that was like, I would bring a business approach to that. But anyway, my lesson that I've learned is that not to do that because it's not as clear cut. And there are two people who are constantly changing and evolving. In a corporate relationship or partnership, it's a snapshot in time and it's for a certain length of time. It's pre-negotiated and everything is clearly negotiated. And there's very few left to interpretation terms. In a relationship, the terms are constantly fucking changing because it's all emotion based. No?
Yeah, no, you're right. Where I'm getting hung up is there is at least a third version. The idea that you can partner with vendors, creatives, contributors. You can partner with lots of different people as a brand, not just talent to talent, but you can partner with somebody who you want to grow with. Like you and I are a good example of that. We got glued together by forces that were already in motion.
Trauma bonding,
that's right. And then we continued to work together. And I continued to choose you from my side, from the brand side, because we could work together and I could speak to you and I could tell you when something wasn't going well, or I could tell you when you needed to ignore something or hyper-focus on something.
Yeah.
And so it was a cultivation of that partnership that really made us successful in what we did. But that's still at the corporate level. And I think that's still more analogous to a relationship than it is to like a talent partnership.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot about relationships that we could also like be its own pod or that we have discussed on other pods entirely. Things like loyalty, mutual respect, admiration, an authentic admiration for the other person. Like
course.
Those things help, I think, also make successful relationships.
Of course, yeah.
But somebody who knows this topic very well is who we are bringing on next. Should we bring Celine out?
Let's get Celine here. Hi, Celine.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce
Hi, Lady
Celine?
Hello.
Who we know and we love.
For many, many years.
We've known
at this
for
point.
so long. When did we first meet?
You guys met before I met either of you.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We've had the great fortune of working with you, both of us, throughout the years. So how are you?
Oh, doing
How's life?
well. Life is great. I mean, I will say, as I told you guys about my calendar block, this is a very exciting part of my day.
Blowing off a little bit of steam, shall we say.
Yeah. And just always great to chat with people who think and feel the same. And, we've had the advantage to do some good and some things that we made as good as we could together.
So, Celine, you are an executive in marketing and advertising and specifically partnerships.
Yes, correct.
So tell us, what is your interpretation of the word partnership? Like, what do you think about what comes to mind when you hear the word partnership?
I think, as you were kind of saying earlier, it can be so many various things. And I think at the crux of it is just like, how 360 do you want it to be? And then we can define what partnership means. And I think it's a partnership on who's on the other side of the table, who is actually helping you get things done. I think it can be an influencer or a celebrity partnership. It could be a brand partnership. It could be a product partnership. From a marketing lens, I think there are so many ways to approach it, from all ends of the spectrum. So,
which do you think are the most efficient for brands? Like if you're like a starter brand, an early challenger brand, and you have just a few bucks to put into partnerships, maybe it's an unfair question, but let's try it anyway. What do you think is the best use of that money? Do you go chase talent that you can afford? Is it another brand that you can partner with? What's the best way to get early traction?
When you think about the true confines of early traction and what brands are often, just the reality of what it often is at that stage, probably something along the talent or affiliate. When I say talent, I don't mean celebrity, because likely budgets respectfully are not there. Yeah. And hey, been there, been told no before, just due to budget. So I know how that feels, no shame. Yeah. But I think just finding synergy of people who can be an extension of your brand voice. And maybe that could be content creators, influencers, affiliates. I might be biased, but I think that's a good use of funds. No, I mean, sure.
I think that's very wise. And I would agree, actually. I think you will find brands from time to time that take all their bucks or the majority of their bucks and be we got to just get a Kardashian in here or something to elevate this tomorrow. It's also just very lazy, I think. It's a way to try to buy that credibility overnight from that influencer or that celebrity. I totally agree with Celine's tactics.
Unless the company is using analytics to identify that influencer will be able to create a conversion for their specific product type, I think it's an incredibly risky thing, especially if you're a startup. You have $5,000 to start your brand. I say paid advertising rather than going into a partnership, because I'm dude, you don't know if that person's they don't even have a pet. So they
Yeah.
might not be able to sell your dog food. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a gamble. It's a high risk, high reward. And like, sometimes you get the big payout in the partnership with an influencer or a celebrity. But if you're a startup or if you're down to your last 5,000, I think there's got to be better tested methods to raise awareness, create sales conversions, stuff like that.
110%. And I think like, listen, we've done celebrity partnerships together. So there's a time and a place for it. And
Absolutely.
I wish everybody had the budgets to be able to activate
We were
in
lucky
that
when
way.
we did. We were lucky to have that.
110%. But I think like when you get into that space, like just because their reach and their like influence is so high, that doesn't automatically equal license and authenticity for you and your brand. And I think like that's the big gray area that you need to be cautious of. Like you said, if you're a dog food company, this person doesn't have a dog. Like the general consumer is smart enough to see through that. And like if you can find a way to partner with someone of that caliber in an authentic way, sure.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how many of those details get overlooked or slip through the cracks when people are not spending enough time doing their research to find the right pairing on, specifically with influencer. It's like shocking. And you're right. As a consumer, even when I'm watching an ad where I'm like, what the hell? Like, this person doesn't have anything to do with dog food. Like, why are they doing that?
I think this is going to be a question, I promise, but I think you'd be really shocked to know, and maybe Celine would be gracious enough to tell us the behind the scenes process. The first draft of like you or your team or whoever, right?
Your lists.
Like,
I'm sure there are lists.
Who should our brand be any of the brands we've worked for, who should our brand be partnering with, right? You get a list. Now, where do you go with that list? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on like the internal process, but like I'll even speak to processes
that we've been a part of
together.
That's right.
Like oftentimes the list, you're going to be on V4 before you're signing
Easily.
pen to paper.
Easily.
And there are so many different lenses you could look at a partnership through. So it's like, okay, there might be, let's just say tier 1, number 1, this fits the box in every specific situation. Maybe you can't afford it. So then you're like, okay, need to revisit. Or there are just so many things that need to be in alignment for pen to get to paper. And it's like, okay, maybe that one person is everything, fits every box, but then not available at the time.
That's right.
Like go to market.
Or not not interested in us.
Yeah.
We forgot to ask if that.
There were many times, even with like talent procurement, where people were like, where's the contract? And it's like, the studio is booked, the photographer's been paid, like everything is ready to go and the contract is still not signed. And it's like, I would also appreciate the trust when we work together of being like, this is gonna get signed. Like, but then I have heard absolute horror stories where they don't show up, like, and it's not there. So it's tough. I mean, it's a celebrity partnerships in particular and high profile influencer partnerships, like they can be very tough to manage. But I actually want to take a step back and talk about your career path of how you got to being where you are now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I started off in the influencer marketing industry in 2018. And I think funny enough, that just came from a need of needing a career change. Had my first job out of college.
What was your degree in from college?
Marketing, which was a part of our business school. So
Where'd you go?
I went to Hofstra University.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that was really a journey, accounting, business analytics, all of that stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love a good spreadsheet, but I'm like, we got a little life and personality over here. Let's have some fun.
Which is actually, that's like your secret sauce. Like your superpower is the way that you engage with all the talent that I've seen over the years, which is ironic because that's what you were cutting out of your career.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah, totally. So needed a change. And funny enough, I actually interviewed for a job that fell under Bill's department on the social team. And they were like, this isn't
Bill said
exactly...
no.
I wasn't in charge of the team.
Bill said it's a hard pass
They're
on
like,
this.
this isn't exactly a fit. We love you though.
Yeah.
How about this?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, immediately. Whatever it is, I don't care. I'm coming to
Wow,
your
you got
company.
lucky because that really ended up being a good fit.
Yeah, really. So
Would have been better if she was on my team though.
So you were in like the product food category at that company, and then you switched over to...
Guys, my first client ever was cigars.
No, really?
Yes. There was little old me.
That's funny.
Wow.
Learned a lot. Got a lot of product also that unfortunately was wasted on me, but I was like really a favorite with my guy friends at that time.
Yeah, I bet.
That was very fun. So yeah, just kind of stayed in that space. And I think like I'll always, always, always say this, like you got to give credit where credit is due. Like in the early days, I was given a seat at tables that I was definitely too green to be at, but it's in my nature to learn. And if it's a sink or swim, your girl is swimming. My floaties are on. I'm powering through.
Yeah.
So just like soaked it all in, and I've been doing influencer marketing ever since.
Wow. And in your current position, like what types of partnerships do you help facilitate?
Yeah, so a big portion is all influencer, but that can come to life in different ways, like via traditional affiliate methods, Instagram partnerships, TikTok partnerships. We're getting a little bit back into the YouTube space, but I think like when we think about like sometimes my role is even a partnership within the other departments at my company. And so like how can influencer content fuel our brand channels, our paid media channels, even like go as far up to as like OTT and TV spots. So
OTT is over the top, Frank.
Thank you. I knew that. I think he was saying that for the audience.
Don't be embarrassed. It's okay.
This guy.
we're bringing a little sass.
This guy. It's the afternoon. He needs his nap.
I do. I'm getting crabby.
You have the credentials to speak on the term partnership. But also, I'm like very curious. There's probably a lot that you do look for KPIs on like what the brand needs to be able to have a successful partnership from their point of view. But there's also like a lot of alignment, just like branding between an influencer and your company or any company that I'm curious, like how much do you think there's a balance between this is cool and worth doing for doing sake and there needs to be a return on investment? Like for people who are running different brands, like how much do you think you would advise what the balance is of those two things?
Yeah, and it's an interesting topic because historically, my entire career, I have only run performance influencer marketing campaigns. So like true ROI, what's the CAC, what's the ROAS? Is it a 1-for-1? Is it a 2-for-1? Like if you're paying for something, what's being contributed or driven back as far as revenue to the company. And I would say influencers and partnerships in general are a very powerful tool. You can achieve amazing goals, but it is one lens. And that's what's so, so important is like, you can get a little too far down the funnel, circling your same consumers if you only look at it through that lens. And there are and should be opportunities where it's like, this is culturally relevant or like a topic that, you know, general consumers are invested in talking about. You need to be a part of that conversation.
That was our relationship in part, was me pushing on Celine's boss to say, yes, all of these have to drive revenue. Some of these have to just be good for the brand. Some of these just have to have KPIs that are unattached to driving revenue and addressing CAC and ROAS and things like that. So it was a needle to thread for sure. And there were lots of partners passed over where my team would be like, we don't want to engage with these people.
I feel like it's never negative for a brand to do something that is, let me think about this. Like when the brand sells out and does something for the sake of creating a return on revenue, it's very noticeable and very talked about on social media. But when a brand gives up that lens and does something because it's fucking cool and it's a great partnership, that to me always gets like a positive response on social and stuff. And do you think brands consider that enough when making the decision of how to balance the two concepts in partnership selection?
No.
I would say
I would say that like it gets back to what I was sort of alluding to with the process and what Celine has to live all the time, and hopefully like less and less now because you've gotten so good at it. There are always our betters in these organizations who hold the purse strings. We were talking about the V4 list, right? My team / Celine's team has come up with these two lists, and then we take it and they're like, oh, these executives have never heard of these people, or their executives has a nephew who's heard of this person, doesn't like him, and you're like, that's off the list for the dumbest fucking reason.
I hate
and
that.
Now
That
you're
always
on,
happens.
and now you're on V8 truly because, and there's also like, well, I know you really want to work with Tom Cruise or whatever, but we can't afford Tom Cruise, and like closing the gap between expectation and reality is a big part of it on the brand side before you even get to like concept and everything.
What do you think like an influencer can do to present themselves for a partnership like that catches your attention? What do you look for?
Yeah, I think that's like a hard thing to get people to understand because on the brand side, I would say maybe not for myself, but maybe at the executive level or higher up, it's like you need to talk about our brand without being paid first. There needs to be synergy and interest.
Really?
Yeah, and I think that some people don't understand that that's not always how it works.
Yeah.
But that's a big, big way. I think there are a ton of amazing tools like social listening and, just who can help you identify the people who are already loyal to you in some capacity, who are authentic users of whatever your product is. I mean, there's no one better to talk about that experience in their own way than if they already know what it is.
When somebody is authentically talking in their voice, it's like great that there's a core overlap in the Venn diagram of what they're talking about in your brand. But then when it comes to like actually paying that person, it adds a layer to the partnership where there's, again, a right and responsibility between two parties, right? So does it chip away from the creative and the authenticity of any partnership when the money is introduced? You start to say like, well, make sure you're using this product, not that product that you may have naturally used, or, promote this color, or, all those different things that the brand does need to make sure is delivered in the partnership. But how much of that like risks the creative value or the creative authenticity of the campaign?
All of it is a risk, I would say. And I think like when it comes to brands, like it really, truly, truly depends on who you have facilitating the partnerships. Like this is probably a hot take, but like there are very few things that I personally would consider a breach in creative concept. Like obviously as marketers, we have a responsibility to abide by FTC regulations. There are things that need to be said to disclose that this is a paid or a gifted or like there's a business relationship here. But I just feel so strongly that I am paying or working with an influencer to use their voice and the audience that they have built as an extension and a benefit to my brand. And I do not know how to speak to those people better than they do.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely encourage people like getting into this space or even other fellow influencer marketers. Like it's very, very important that like the brief doesn't get too convoluted or too strict, because if it is, one, that's all you're getting. And if you're working with numerous influencers, like, okay, just get the same piece of content 20 times. That to me is not a value add. Yeah. And I think it's just like, you gotta be flexible. Like you have to lean in to the unknown a little bit.
That's a very unique and trusting view, which is why you're so great at what you do. I mean, more often than not, especially like having managed a lot of folks that are in positions at like Celine's, we are paying somebody that is larger than ourselves to be our mouthpiece for what we want them to say. And then at the last minute, we throw something in there that says like, do this as authentically, as you can. When in fact, you're exactly right. The value of a partnership is a new way to get in front of a customer or potential customer, right? It's just a different way. Like rather than me saying it, the brand, let me get Frank, who has more notoriety and a different level of intimacy with these folks, to say it for me. Therefore, to your point, they should say it exactly as they natively would say it. You know?
And I think some of the best things come from that. Like some people even internally would have never thought to use a product in that way. And, so long as it's safe to be used in that way, like amazing. This is the best piece of content that we have. And we didn't come up with it. And I think that's where the power.
Get out of your own way.
Yeah.
It's funny, like what comes first, the partner or the creative? Like sometimes I've found teams will develop a creative concept and then try to find the best influencer to fit that, versus want to work with an influencer so bad and then use that influencer's life to develop the creative. Is there a preference from your point of view that, or is there one that has been more successful for brands that you've noticed?
I personally don't have a preference. I mean, I kind of view myself as an internal agency. And so it's like, look, whatever you need to happen, I'm going to make it happen. So what that is, I'll let other folks decide. Sure, I definitely have an opinion. I have an opinion on all things. And I'll share that professionally. But I think like if there is a specific creative campaign in mind, like that needs to be clear. And I think like I loved what you guys were saying earlier just about like, just be upfront. I think anybody who works with me would say like I'm pretty much a straight shooter. And I think that's why I've had success in getting things across the line, because like I'm not gonna pretend that I don't need something that I do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hide that from, like, it's of no benefit. And
Yeah.
so if there's a true creative concept, like, let's just even say the crux of the campaign is comedy. Not every influencer can execute that. And so, yes, the creative needs to come first so we can supply you with the right,
Yeah, I
talent.
think when they don't meet, and I totally agree with Celine, I think you either find like we want to work with this person so badly because they fit our brand and we have to figure out something really smart to do with them, or we have this amazing idea, who would be the best lead in this idea. But when you do those two things in parallel without joining them, yelling from mountaintops across, you get the worst product in the world. Where you get some fucking half-baked creative concept that the internal or external team came up with. You've jammed it in front of a celebrity and they're like, yeah, look, I mean, you're paying me enough. I'll do it if you want me to do it.
Yeah.
And the end product is terrible. So totally agree that it needs to at least be in concert with each other.
Yeah, and all will happen. Not everyone, even if you're the best at.
That's true. Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
All versions will happen at some point.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So many stamps on the way out the door. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm sure that there are a lot of people listening that are influencers or trying to become an influencer or trying to work with a big established brand. Like, do you have any advice? How can somebody develop themselves, or what are you looking for in an influencer? You spoke about it previously just a bit, but like, I'm just curious if there's more advice you could give to somebody who's trying to develop a brand that will ultimately be appealing for a larger partnership. Because is it always about the numbers, or is it about your content style? Like, what's the mixture there that people need to be aware of?
Oh gosh, it's like so hard to answer that question because it truly depends. And so I would encourage them to just think about like, what brands do you want to work with, and do a little bit of research about them, because the answer will change for every single brand. Like, I have a really good friend of mine who is an influencer for luxury fashion brands, and like the things that he has to create and cater to are completely different than what I look for. I've mentioned performance marketing, like, yes, sometimes, unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is literally about the sales.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And that's not coming from me. That's not coming from, these things are decided at much higher levels of companies. But I think it's really doing your own investigation. And it's like, does a brand have like a certain content style that you see them paying other creators? And like, can you create in that quality? I would say never try to model yourself after someone else, because for me, the number one thing that I'm looking for signals of, and you might get it wrong, but like, what is their tie to their audience and how deep does that go? Like, what type of community
1,000%.
does this influencer have? And like, that's why I want to work with you.
Yeah.
What about on your side? Like when we come to you, dum-dums like me and Celine come to you and say, we want to work with Michael Jackson. And you're like, that's the worst fucking brand decision in the world. How do you break it to us? How do you steer us?
Well, like when I started Demery Tech, like very quickly, it was like, okay, here's an analytical justification for why you're cutting this amount of money. But then that always took a back seat to the cultural relevance and like,
always.
and the content style. So as much as I had like, I have the person for you, it was never that person. That person never got picked. It was always who the internal team thought would be best, or
We've had that conversation many times.
yeah. And I respect it and I understand it, because there's also like motives internally that I'm not aware of as an external partner for the company. But I would always say, when it comes to like actual influencer selection, this old phrase of like, you can have 1 million followers, but only 10 are actually like engaging in your content is the same as having somebody who has 10 followers and all 10 will engage with their content and create that conversion for the brand. And so I never defaulted to those top line metrics of an influencer or a celebrity. I was always looking deeper at engagement or click through, and then pairing that to a cultural conversation that was relevant for the brand. But so many times brands would come to me thinking like, oh, it's a one size fit all. You use the example of Kim Kardashian. Oh, she's going to be great. Like, that's the goal for our brand. And it's like, dude, she can't promote crypto. You're in the wrong industry for that type of partnership. So there were, like you said, logistical like justifications to get people off the list. Incredibly personal conversation, like, or decision-making process about a very important part of any successful business.
What do you think, question for both of you, what do you think is there a tide against influencers and content creators these days? Like, has there been a natural contrast created, to go in maybe a wholly new direction?
Yeah, I think the question is always going to be there. I think there's also just like it's this concept of one, I think there was like a really mystical air around influencers and what was going on and how they contributed and how the back end of the business actually worked. And I think consumers are becoming more educated on that. And that creates some people being less inclined to interact with that type of content or like
be
feel
influenced.
like, totally. Yeah. So I think, yes, there's always going to be naysayers, but like, I don't think influencing in general will ever go away. Yes, in the way that we activate and execute these partnerships is relatively new.
Yeah.
But like the idea of influencing is not new at all. Like, this has existed since the beginning of time. I mean,
I think for as long as there's platforms to do it on, there will be people to talk to and hear from just in different ways, which actually brings me to my next question is, we talked about this earlier, and I think it's actually really smart. I've never done this, but have you ever thought about maybe doing like a short residency with somebody? Micro, macro, big celebrity, rather than doing like a one-hit campaign and moving on to somebody else.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing like a year, 18 months with a particular talent?
Yeah, so actually I do.
You do that already?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we have, a subset of influencers that we do work with on year-long contracts. And I would absolutely encourage people to look into that. One, even from like a cost savings perspective, I have had a positive response. I think, look, it is a business. Influencers and their agents, it's guaranteed, money. Like you can work with someone one-off for maybe a massive sum, but you might be able to work with someone more long-term. And maybe that monthly fee isn't as much as it could be, but like it's guaranteed. And then you get to build the partnership over time. Yeah. Typically, you also get like higher levels of access with longer term partnerships. And so
I recently I love when a brand sits down with a business, either a partnership with another business or an influencer, and does like a multi-year plan and can get ahead of their life's actual milestones and be there to support them. There's so many brands that are about wanting somebody to be developing or personally growing, an influencer. Totally. So many brands get behind that messaging. And so it doesn't need to necessarily be like about the newest product feature, but it could be about like your mission statements are aligning. And that is a beautiful partnership opportunity, I think. And a lot of people don't take advantage of it because it's like, next, who's going to be bigger? Like who's going to the next relevant?
Well, it's funny because what we're talking about is actually quite old school, right? Like in the 50s, the marketing and advertising was about attaching yourself to a person, and that person was your spokesperson.
And in film, you used to be signed to a studio. Like, you would sit down with these people for much longer than we do now.
Then and now what happened is we were like, oh, well, that person or that group of people attracts one audience, but we need to get that audience over there and that audience over there. And so now you're running a stable of partners and influencers that are all meant to like pluck the Midwestern moms and the Brooklyn dads and all that, right? So you're trying to like scratch a lot of itches at the same time instead of just, investing and creating a relationship with that one person.
To your point earlier, the idea of like, I think that influencer and celebrity has been democratized because of social media. And so like so many more people have the opportunity to make money becoming an influencer that it has allowed for you to like comb through and actually you can start to identify who's really a good influencer and a bad influencer based off of their content or their style, and who's done something creative and interesting. Because if you're trying to just look at metrics of somebody, they're probably on that list, you could populate 100 names. But then you do start to get into content. So like it does matter your style or your type of content, the quality that you're creating at any level of the metrics that you are. You know what I mean? Like
110%. And I would say like there is a use case for everyone. Like someone who might create really beautiful, high quality content can work for some other brands and get hired by those brands. But then some brands just want like hey, you might have like an iPhone 4 and we're like, we love you.
Yeah,
Thanks. Great.
It's
you know?
actually kind of hot right now to shoot more nostalgia.
Yeah.
For sure.
Taking a step back outside of influencer, like tell us about other types of partnerships that you've experienced in your career. What have you learned from those?
I think a big learning that I had was how long a co-created product partnership takes.
Oh, yeah.
And that is something that I often have to, one, I needed to be educated on, and two, need to educate others on. Because I think, you know, you might get in a situation where it's like, oh, this is really great. I have this idea for a product, like would love to launch it. Like, how does this summer sound? And you're oh, well, it sounds great, but here's all the development, here's all the testing, here's all the quality control. So how about in 2 years?
Yeah, we're 18 months off. From,
It's like whose schedule it has priority? Like, are you rushing it on the product development to match the new movie coming out of the big celebrity, or are you prioritizing quality control and product over?
And it speaks to the need of people like Celine, and I'm sure you do this because I've seen you do this, but like having to always have a bunch in the chamber, because what you need today, you should have thought of 2 years ago. Right. So you always have to have stuff cooking so that when that need does arise, you already have done that thinking, not let's start the thinking now and realize this in 18 months, you know?
And I would say that's probably, I feel like the biggest challenge in like any partnership right now is things just move so quickly. It's like, I needed this idea and I needed this budget 2 years ago so it could happen tomorrow.
Right.
And I think like a lot about what you said, like building these relationships with influencers, like it might not be about the product. It's not about the product at all. It's about the relationship. And so that lives and exists, and foundationally, then you have the ability to say, hey, I might need something tomorrow. Can I tap you for that?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not literally tomorrow,
Yeah.
but like, that's what this industry and partnerships is all about. It is literally relationship currency.
But see, this is why exactly like at the top of it, we were talking about the priority of how to spend the money. Like for a small business, like you do need there to be a tomorrow campaign, and it does need to go well. And so it is such a risk. And like these bigger partnerships that take years to develop, whether it be surrounding a product in collaboration or a message that is coming out years in advance or months in advance, like for a small business owner or an entrepreneur that's starting something new, if you rush a campaign or a partnership campaign, there's so many pitfalls that it can fall into so easily that it's why it's not my first go-to for small businesses.
But there are scales to everything too. Like not everyone needs to do a celebrity partnership. Or I think like, honestly, like you had said this to me like super, super early on in my career. No, and it stuck with me ever since. Like I probably think about this like numerous times per week.
What did I say?
Just like, no, it's wonderful. Like your reputation and the experience follows you. And so like you can define that in different ways, but like I would definitely just encourage like small business owners or people entering into a partnership, like check in with yourself all the time, constantly and consistently. Like, what experience am I building here? And is that aligned with my brand?
The reputation of like, especially for somebody in your position, and when I've done talent procurement as well, you've probably come across this as well, Bill, but it's like, your reputation is one thing and it's easy to maintain while the partnership is going well.
Right.
But I've been in many partnerships that have not gone well, not just with influencer, but even with business partner or investor or all these things. And it's like, how do you act when a partnership is dissolving?
Yeah.
And that is where people like, the second you become a villain in somebody's story, that first day is what they remember you for. They don't remember everything leading up to it.
Yeah, and by the way,
I very much am like, I believe in maintaining a good reputation through the dissolving of a partnership as best as possible. But if you cross me though, like dead to me and you lose access. That's the biggest thing that I can take away. I've come up against that a few times in my life.
In good and bad, I want you on my team.
Yeah.
Because I know I know you're going to bat.
But what I was going to say to that is like, we had one in particular that we worked on, and those decisions were made not only above the three of us, and we were all at a pretty senior level at the time, but also in advance of us even being able to provide feedback and say what we should or shouldn't do. So it's funny, it is reputational on your end. It is also reputational on our end, because I can tell you at that time, I took a good amount of heat for choosing that particular person. I'm just talking internally.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? And why would you put our investment there? And, so yeah, it is a very dicey thing, but I totally agree that all you have is that.
And like at the end of the day, well, maybe there are some mind readers out there. I wouldn't know. I would love to meet one. But like no one actually knows. Everything is a calculated risk. And like what I was saying before about like relationship currency, like, yes, you might be in a situation one day where your partnership, whatever you view that as, goes awry. What you want to make sure is that you've behaved with integrity and like,
can answer for it in the end.
Yeah, you can answer for it. And it's like, okay, yes, this one particular instance may have not gone the way that we hope, but like in those partnerships, it's like, I hope to work with you again on something else.
Yeah.
The number of times I've sat with a CFO or a CEO and I give them the analogy of like, your whole entire paycheck probably isn't in your checking account, right? You probably have some investment somewhere, or at least a savings account for, to try to take some calculated risks to grow your money. That's what a brand is doing, right? They can't all fucking be winners. Sometimes you're going to miss. Sometimes it's just going to deliver halfway. But like, if you're not planting those seeds and investing, you're just running a checking account. Yeah. You're just running money in the door, advertising money back out the door.
And to that, I love seeing when a brand takes a risk on a partnership. I commend it, whether it's ultimately leading to the loss of sales or anything internally, like reporting that I wouldn't know. But when I can recognize when a brand is taking a leap on a partnership, when it comes especially to influencer, but even if it's another company that they're trying to collab with, they can be really innovative, really fun projects. And they might be total misses if the KPI is sales conversion or return on investment. But it's that constant balance of like, but you tried it, and there's going to be a whole new audience that will have discovered you because of this partnership opportunity and appreciate you better because you took the risk on it.
You have to be willing to take risks and be open and like lean into. It could go really well or it could go poorly. Hopefully, not really poorly, but like, I just think back to what you said, like if you're not willing to invest, you're not future-proofing at all.
Yeah. And
there's no way.
We've been on some of those that have been like, it's all at the end of the day, it's all about attribution on our side, right? If we can't attribute a conversion based on the thing that we did, then like it was kind of for naught. It's losing efficacy. So we might have done a couple campaigns that like on the surface kind of fell flat, but have done amazing wonders for us with new audiences or people that we weren't able to reach before. Those two things are so incalculable that we don't factor them into the equation of success at the corporate level. So what Celine has to deliver is like, how many units and widgets have you sold this month, based on those partnerships?
Taking like a 10,000 foot view, are there any partnerships that you can point to that you're like, God, I loved that one? Is there any like examples out there now?
Oh, 110%. I mean, hopefully I'm allowed to plug them because I'm not affiliated with them at all. But oh my God, the team at Poppy is crushing.
Aaron Platt, who shot our campaign, our musical, is the director of the commercial for the Poppy. He's so talented. Yeah.
Unreal. Everything that they do, I think, even from some of the influencer mailers that they do, or even they just did Coach Erla. Like,
I saw that.
That was
and again,
so great.
They refined it by just focusing on Alex, not on a whole house filled with dozens of they just focused on her. And I think that specificity is like so rare to see and so valuable.
But even just like, I mean, being someone on this side, I can see all the work that went into that. I mean, come on. My God. The details.
They
like,
tinted the mirrors to be the brand colors. Like they really executed
Is your
that.
life, we were talking about this earlier on a different topic around creativity and inspiration. Is your life better for knowing all the dirt in the background that it takes to make that happen? Or do you watch like a movie in a partnership and you're just like fucking twisted because you can't even just appreciate it anymore?
Yeah.
Probably that. I mean, it's really, and then I find myself sometimes like being out with friends who are not in the industry. And I'm like, no, but you don't get it. And I'm like, shut up. Let them live.
I do that to
I'm
Abby.
right there with you.
I'm like, I pause the TV and I'm like, Abby, you have no idea. I'll tell you exactly how this got the contract. She's like, shut the fuck
People
up
all
and
the
press
time,
play.
I love to be like, that's at least a mil. I love to like throw out the numbers of like, that's a mil easy, that partnership.
What about the things that people are like, a mill wouldn't even scratch the
Yes.
surface
Yeah.
Not
of
even
what
pay
that
for
is.
talent. Not even pay for talent.
How about you? Any campaigns that stand out over the course of time that
Yeah,
were great
well,
collaborations or partnerships?
Not necessarily that I've been partner of, but one that launched recently that I thought it was like sneaky brilliant was Magnolia and Keds.
Okay.
Right? Like, first of all, the way it was executed was really amazing.
Once
Magnolia,
again, Drew, who we worked with,
Right.
was the food stylist.
Magnolia cupcakes and Keds, the shoes. But like Magnolia came to prominence because of the whole Sex and the City thing, right? And like everybody lining up on Bleecker. And it's mostly at this point tourists and people moving through Moynihan Station and everything. But who was their audience? It was the audience of those women that were wearing Keds back in the day, and they're like their high school and college years, like approaching Y2K and whatever, 2002, whatever. It was really brilliant to have that nostalgic callback, I thought. Not incredibly relevant on the surface, the way I look at it. When I say that to you, you're like, well, yeah, it's not that sexy. But when you like dig into it a little bit, you're like, this is really reciprocated. It's the definition of a solid partnership because each brand is getting what is intended for them and what they desire. So yeah, it's just one that I didn't work on. I have nothing to do with it. I know some of the people who worked on it. We know some of the people. I just thought it was like a really excellent marriage of brands executed exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of my like case studies that I always revert back to is Michael Jordan and Nike, because I think it was such a cornerstone, like the first of so many campaigns that have now since followed or tried to replicate. And the risk, that the effort, have you seen the movie actually with Matt Damon in it, Air, I believe?
Yeah.
Is also like such a fun like movie to watch. But the risk that both parties took and the trust, I think is such a great example of like when it works off, man, the payoff can be huge. And like to this day is a multi-million, $100 million.
By the way, not a small part of that story is the business acumen of Michael Jordan's mother.
Oh, 1,000%.
Who put him into a deal that like he obviously never has to work again. But I mean, he makes like, he's a billionaire because of that.
Well, he had skin in the game. And I think that that's like where some of the most fruitful partnerships do come. Like when you asked earlier about, does paying someone take away the creativity? Like, I really think it's all about how you structure the deal. There are many ways that payment can come with mutual success, whether it's commission or royalty or something of that nature, like mutual success. We want to do as well as you can help make us do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So will you stay in partnerships?
I think so.
Yeah.
At least for the foreseeable future. But, your girl's got big dreams.
In which direction? As much as you're comfortable saying, in which direction do you want to grow? And like, what do you think you want to do if we were sitting here 10 years from now?
I mean, 10 years from now, hopefully I'll be a CEO.
That's right, bitch.
So
yeah, probably 5 years from now, but yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully 5 as well. Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that I haven't done yet. And I've always like really deeply respected like those on the talent representation side. Like I'm probably a little bit too far down my journey on the brand side of things for that. Maybe in the traditional sense, but
flip it.
Yeah,
Go to the
flip
dark
it.
side. Go to the dark side.
Yeah, but I think like I love marketing in general. And so, definitely see myself being involved in this to some capacity, but maybe hopefully from an executive level, a true C-suite executive level at some point.
And outside of your own career path, like what do you think is the future of partnerships?
Oh, Lord. I think honestly, we don't even know. I think within the next 5 years, like there could be a new platform that comes out that we've never even heard of. But I think TikTok Shops is turning brands and businesses on their heads right now. I personally am excited to learn and test more there.
I'll wager a guess. I think it becomes much more immersive and harder to pull apart the creator and the brand itself.
Yeah.
Because anything less than that would be going to a place now where people see right through anyone willing to shill for a brand. I think it has to become more engrossed, enmeshed. Partnerships and influencers working as closer, like maybe even stakeholders in a brand.
Yeah. And I think in that regard, like the transactional type partnerships, only looking through one KPI, the people who will be doing partnerships well will have a suite of KPIs that they're looking for. And like it's really handheld between whoever the partner is, brand, influencer, celebrity.
More and more, especially bigger names have been asking for equity in the business, right?
Yep.
I had 2 which were comically bad the pitch was okay, but one was to The Rock and one was to Will Smith, and both of them were basically like, what is the equity situation? You know, I don't get out of bed for, and understandably so, right? We didn't have the money to really excite them, but what could the equity upside be for them?
Well, and
so that's a whole new way of looking at it too.
A great way to, if you don't have, you know, the capital or the budget up front, but you're really
back then.
Yeah. I've been a part of many of those.
All right.
I think we did it.
I think we did it, guys.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Guys, thanks for having me.
So nice to talk with you.
Thank you
Celine.
so much,
Thank you for
Celine.
doing this whole fucking
Please,
thing.
an honor to be with you guys. I'm like, you call, I'm answering.
You're the best. Where can people follow you on social media or get in touch with you on LinkedIn? What's
Do you want people to
connect?
follow you on
Do
social
you want
media?
people to?
Sure. You'll probably just see a couple pictures of my dog here and there.
Yeah.
I'm not a content creator at all. So you might see me once every 2 months, but I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn.
Nice.
Yeah, feel free to hit up your girl.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Celine.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yay.